Hey guys, this is Tyler here. I am going to talk about a topic that I have thought about, and I actually foresee this issue becoming more greater in the near future in both the US and many other Western countries, and that's the shortage of military units. We have to remember here the status and situation of the military, especially in countries like the US and Canada. The popularity of being in the military and the status or the perception of status of being like in the US military has really gone down in the past 10 to 20 years. But especially like in the past 50 to 80 years, it's just nothing like it used to be. Although I do believe it can be a very good and optimal career for certain people, I do see it as something that less and less guys desire. And I don't think it's just because of the pay grade and because of the limitations. I think much of it has to do with both what the military stands for in countries, how the economies in countries have changed and became very mercantilistic in many parts of the world, especially in the US, and just the overall patriotic sense of duty that guys just don't feel now towards their own country. And this totally makes sense when we look at how much in general, guys have been very put down and demonized in much of the West nowadays. It's really terrible. And as you would expect, guys, for this reason, among others, don't want to be in the military. The military historically was also fighting a very different kind of battle, very different type of conflict that they historically fought. I think it was more noble if we look at, especially in the centuries past. And obviously it's evolved a lot, and the current day is quite a bit different now. We obviously have seen situations where like the draft was imposed in countries like the US and many parts of Europe, in Asia, all over the place. This has been systematically instituted. And if we look at, like, for example, in the US now, it's very difficult now, based on research I've conducted, for them to even find guys that are physically and mentally fit to serve just basic roles in the military. For example, obesity is a big problem for the US population. And there's other problems that are caused by obesity that then also hinder these guys. This is probably one of the main ones, though, among other maybe certain psychological and maybe problems with joints in this. But a lot of those other problems actually tie to like the obesity. Depression's another example here. And as would make sense, if many guys feel left out of the society and they feel like they're mistreated, they're going to have very little desire to serve their country. And also the fact that many guys are leaving their own countries. They don't want to live in a Western country or live in an Eastern country, wherever it may be. Andrew Henderson talks about going to where you're treated best rather than staying and fighting. I think more people are now deciding to leave and to go where they're treated best, because it's just, this notion is more preferred now. That's one of the big reasons less and less guys see the military as being a viable option for their future, let alone living in their own country. Now, then having a sense of patriotic duty to serve for the country, that takes it to a whole another extreme. And this is probably one reason among many why they've had to resort to recruiting and enlisting more and more women into the military. Also, the military has kind of became more intelligence-based and more psychological aspects to it than ever before presently. If we look at historically, not just in the US, but in many countries, one of the sure things that would convince guys to go and serve in the military was that they would have a girlfriend or spouse waiting for them. They might have a family. And for many guys, this isn't available. And even for guys in the military, this isn't available. They're still single. Some guys obviously desire this, and it does make me question and think that maybe the draft will be reimposed in countries in the near future. It could happen in a country like the U.S., but there certainly are problems in why I think this couldn't happen. As I mentioned before, a lot of guys are physically and mentally disqualified from even serving any function. I don't see this problem getting better. I actually see it worsening in the coming years. There's been a lot of scientific study. Testosterone levels have been stated to gone down a lot in the past 30 to 50 years for the male population. Now, there's a lot of subjectivity here to these studies, but I could see this also being part of the equation. But if they can do this, there's not going to be a lot of soldiers basically qualified. And of course, we have other elements now, like the whole gay and transsexual, all of these elements play into it. And this is another factor. Many guys don't want to serve. They don't want to serve these kind of causes that U.S. is supporting, and then have to actually be with guys that are like this. Because some guys have said in a combat situation who've served, this is a terrible ideal. This often wouldn't work. But I can't relate to that because I've never been in a combat situation. If we look at a lot of the late stage empires, like in Rome and Greece, this is actually really common when you have like a very splintered population, very polarizing ideals. The military often becomes very weak for these countries. If you look over to like Russia and China, it's a whole different situation. The Russians might have the strongest military force now in the world. While they may lack from the missile and the bombs and this standpoint, they certainly make up the quality of soldier and men that they have. They have a huge army of guys that are combat ready to fight. And in the coming years, this probably will continue to go down in the U.S. And this is just one of many elements that's declining stateside, just as it is in other Western countries with strong military powers. Going back to the whole draft thing, the fact that women are, of course, very much pushed into military roles today, it probably still wouldn't provide enough soldiers, especially in combat roles. Now, would the draft be instituted as a way to make up for numbers that they lack in the guy population? Maybe. I don't think it would work, though. And if you look at history, any time a draft was imposed, especially if it was forced upon the population and they were not keen on conflicts, on battle, it didn't work out. We saw that with Vietnam, and for many years following Vietnam, very hard recruiting soldiers. And also, there's so much access to information and to media. People can find out everything they want to know about topics, about why countries are clashing against each other, the back source of all these problems. Many years ago, all this information wasn't accessible to the masses, so people couldn't see it from that other perspective. And this may be also one of the biggest reasons why guys are much less keen about being in any kind of soldier role. I even look at historical conflicts in world wars that were going on, any kind of battle. And if they had the same access to information, I don't think some of these battles, some of these wars would have occurred. I think they would have been avoided simply because they could not have recruited enough guys to fight in those wars. And I don't think a draft system either would have been effective enough to have enough battle-ready soldiers. This is actually one of the things guys like generals and leaders have said, that in Vietnam, they may have been able to draft all these guys, but they weren't eager to be in battle. They didn't have any desire to be there. Psychologically, if the guy doesn't want to be there, these soldiers are going to be very unmotivated to fight, because the psychological component always precedes the physical. Look at soldiers like Audie Murphy from WW2. He was a relatively small guy, but he was a phenomenal soldier. And it all started psychologically speaking. Napoleon Bonaparte, he was a general, so yes, he wasn't necessarily in the front line, but he very much had a leader mentality. This is how he was seen, and it's the same thing. It all started psychologically, and then it passed down to all the guys under him. And the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of access to information. People can see why battles are taking place. Also, countries are different. Like, the makeup of a country often was very reflective. It was mostly one or just a few demographics. It wasn't all these groups mixed together. When you have all these groups mixed together and then fighting other groups, it mainly doesn't often work very well for guys. They may be told that they're fighting for the same tribe, but I think deep down many of them don't feel like they're fighting for the same tribe. It's actually can be quite the opposite. Even in World War II, there were guys that went over, they were in different countries, they had German parents. They went over and fought for the Germans. They didn't want to fight for the U.S. or whatever country they came from because they felt like at heart that they were Germans, that they weren't of that country. And this is the same issue in many other conflicts. If we look at these Middle Eastern conflicts, many guys will absolutely not go to battle against what guys see as their own brothers or cousins. They won't do this and this is one of the problems of modern day countries, that due to this whole demographic mix-up of people, it often psychologically makes less guys wanting to fight against other countries that they see as kind of their own brothers or cousins. And also, the people can kind of see to the inefficiency component and what exactly is it accomplishing. People understand now how, like, war contractors and how bank system benefits greatly from being at war, and it really just often benefits the extreme elite and high up military guys, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of long-term positive impact on populations. And with this access to information, people can see that, and people have seen historically what conflicts have done, what battles have done, and see that it's not necessarily been very good long term. And even if we look over to, like, Iraq, as I said before, Henderson has spoken about going to a place where you prefer rather than staying and fighting. Many people too realize they're not going to fight against a whole system, which is effectively what you're fighting against. Like, if you fight for an army, you're fighting for the system. You're not fighting for yourself or for any individual. And if you know that you don't like those causes and you know you're not going to defeat the system, probably better off going to where you identify. And more people just realize this is long-term a better option. And for many of the guys that don't see their future in the respective country, they're not going to go and fight for these places. I've spoken about before that we see many former U.S. soldiers now living in other countries. Some of them long-term, permanently in other countries. They reside there. It's very interesting. Some of them have found wives in the countries they're living. It may be Philippines, it may be Russia, China. And it's like, why would they be living in countries that were supposedly their enemies? And then they go there and have wives and families. It seems kind of crazy, and I think this illustrates just the problems of Western militaries, and much more emphasis has to be put on improving those respective societies rather than going to conflict against other countries, when the guys in those countries that are serving for those militaries can't even get the basics back at home. And that's really what it boils down to. Many of these guys just obviously they end up leaving and going somewhere else. And yeah, some of them may get disability, they may get some other benefits from having been in the military, but if they're going to places that aren't their own country, it kind of illustrates what the U.S. military or other Western militaries have done and how it's very ineffective. Also, as I mentioned before, sense of mercantilism is very high in many countries. A long time ago, obviously, resources and might was gained through having a lot of manpower, military power. It was by going to battle. Whereas now, a lot of it's through intelligence. It is through, like, business and commerce. Even when you think of the military industrial complex, a lot of the guys that really benefit are the guys that are running these companies, military contract companies. I saw a guy who was running a bulletproof vest company, and he was getting these 9-figure contracts for like over 10 years during the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is really where a lot of the power is now. It's intelligence. A long time ago, you could be like a general in an army or a leader, and through that, you would actually be able to have vast amount of ability to gain resources, however that may be. There was a famous German general during World War II, and he had just trainloads of wealth, like all sorts of artwork, gold, among other items. He had a fortune, and he was actually a general in the military. And yeah, some people may say, well, it's kind of like that now because these military generals, they start working in the private sector, and then they segue into that. When I say military general, I mean these guys are still generals, and they're still becoming very wealthy. And when your system is mostly like merchant run, it's business run, this is how most people are going to see it, the real means to gain a lot of status and a lot of power. And that's where things have shifted. If the status symbol now was to be a military general or a high leader, a colonel, I think every other guy would be desiring that, would be trying to obtain that. But I think now it's in other areas, and likewise that's where the masses are going or trying to go. Going back, the military in the U.S., Canada, they've instituted policies that are basically self-destroying the most capable and high-quality guys. When you start instituting high quotas of women, of trannies, of all these other groups, this becomes priority. You're going to detract from having a lot of the real battle-ready guys, a lot of the guys who have real sense of duty and responsibility to their country. These type of guys aren't going to be interested. They're going to see this as it's not being a cause worth fighting for. Let alone then you have the country as a whole, which is going down in shambles. And also, what are the causes these countries are fighting for? There could be an argument made that U.S. was actually fighting for liberty and fighting for freedom, and there was real purpose in their battle and conflicts. Now, not so much. Doesn't seem to be a lot of sensibility. A lot of it actually seems very motivated around business, around how countries like the U.S. can enrich themselves and bring greater resources to them. And also so they can go into countries and totally screw around with the natural leadership, natural sense of order, and impose their own systems and that reflects this Western model. Iraq, this is exactly what they did, and some people might say Iraq is better today. From research I've done, it doesn't seem any better. In fact, it often seems worse. And there's been a lot more resources that flooded into Iraq after all these battles occurred. U.S. makes all of these places their kind of system. And also look at like in other, whether it was Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, these mini empires, they don't like these kind of empires, and they'll come in and try to dismantle them for their own purpose. A lot of it, as I said, it goes back to money, power, and control over those populations. It doesn't really have to do with the fact that they don't like how the leaders are running everything, and they often there's a facade on these issues. There's kind of a false front here you have to realize. But for guys that feel that this can work for them, they can gain skills, it may suit their purpose, go for it. You just got to remember, though, that don't think how it is now. Think how it is in 5 years, in 10 years, or 20 years. Are you going to have the same ideals likely? That's most important. And talk to guys who've been through this and get their input and see if they would recommend it. If for some reason there is a draft system imposed, I think now, like in the U.S. or Canada, many guys would leave. They would never go for this. They wouldn't serve. And it is interesting that drafts almost historically or conscription, women are never forced to do this. Even here in Estonia, very matriarchal society, women don't have to serve. there's no conscription, whereas for guys they do. In most of Europe, in a lot of countries in Europe, guys still have this mandatory service, and in most of these countries women don't have to do it. But this is very reflective of the double standards in a lot of these Western countries. In any sense, it will be interesting to see how the coming years play out. So give me your feedback below, and thank you.